Namaskar, good evening. At the outset, I'd like to thank Northeast Science Movement and Vigyan Bharati for providing me with this opportunity to share a talk on viral pandemics of 21st century in this prestigious NESM talk series, which has been initiated in the middle of this year during the pandemic by the NESM. The 21st century has witnessed some of the deadliest viral pandemics with far-reaching consequences. These include severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus or SARS-CoV in 2002, influenza A virus subtype H1N1 in 2009, Middle East respiratory syndrome coronavirus or MERS-CoV in 2012, Ebola virus in 2013, and the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 or SARS-CoV-2 during 2019 to present. Emergence of infectious disease is known to directly impact human health outcomes, paving the way to impaired sustainable development. The consequences of SARS-CoV epidemic in 2002 and 3 were fatal, affecting more than 8,000 people, resulting in more than 700 deaths by February 2003. However, the outbreak identified a number of shortcomings in hospitals and community control systems in many of the affected regions. The 2009 H1N1 influenza pandemic also had a far-reaching consequence on global health, which impacted over 214 countries and caused more than 18,000 deaths. With a persistent threat from earlier influenza pandemics, the scientific community were much more prepared in mindset and infrastructure, which allowed for rapid and effective research on basic scientific aspects of the disease, with impacts on its control and lessons for future epidemics. MERS-CoV, another coronavirus outbreak, had a very high case fatality rate among the recent pandemics, which is about 43%. More recently, during 2013 to 2016, the Ebola virus disease has been one of the largest of its kind in history, which resulted in a huge public health menace with large-scale social and economic impact in the affected countries. This outbreak also presented opportunities for research that might help national and global healthcare systems to better prepare for future outbreaks. As the new decade begins, the world engages in fighting to contain another novel virus of pandemic proportions, named SARS-CoV-2, which causes coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19. It represents one of the greatest public health emergencies in human history. The virus was first detected in December 2019 and isolated from several workers of the Wuhan seafood market in China who were suffering from pneumonia. Shortly thereafter, the World Health Organization declared it a global pandemic on 11th March 2020. SARS-CoV-2 is highly contagious and has currently spread across 220 countries and territories of the world. As of 11 December 2020, SARS-CoV-2 infections have been confirmed in more than 68 million people, of which about 45 million people have recovered from the virus so far, and more than 1.5 million people have succumbed to it. According to these statistics, the recovery and death rates of the disease are about 65% and 2% respectively. At present, supportive therapeutic strategies and mitigation measures to contain the virus remain the best weapons in the fight to control COVID-19. However, scientists around the world are striving to develop vaccines via accelerated processes in order to confer immunity to the public against the virus. Gender and age-based differences in the susceptibility to SARS-CoV-2 infection in comparison with other viruses. Males and females of different age groups often vary in their general response to these viruses. During SARS epidemic of 2002, patients below 25 years of age tended to present with mild to moderate illness, whereas those above 60 years had a high mortality rate, that is more than 50%, and presented with more severe symptoms. In addition, epidemiological studies showed that males had higher fatality rates compared with that of females, 21% versus 13%. Similarly, data from the MERS-CoV outbreak of 2012 showed that patients in the age groups of 45 to 59 years and above 60 years were more likely to be infected, suffer from more severe symptoms, and have higher fatality rates compared with younger adults. Furthermore, the disease occurrence in males was higher than that in females, with fatality rates of 52% and 23% respectively. Another study also reported that among the confirmed cases of MERS-CoV, the male-female ratio was approximately 2:1, with highest prevalence of infected cases, more than 40%, seen in the age group of 41 to 60 years. Variations in disease prevalence among men and women may be attributed to the differences in cultural roles and gender norms that influence risk for contracting the disease. Women are more likely to employ themselves in essential services such as healthcare service and other industries of service as compared to men. However, men predominate in other sectors such as construction work and cleaning, security work, taxi services, and low-skilled social work. Although women are more proactive about their health when compared with men, they frequently receive less intensive diagnostic and treatment interventions, with women's symptoms often being overlooked or assumed to be psychosomatic in many societies. Viruses other than those in the family Coronaviridae include the H1N1 virus, which caused a pandemic in 2009 and primarily affected children and young adults of reproductive age, with the highest attack and hospitalization rates in individuals between the ages of 0 and 40 years. The male and female morbidity ratio is more than 1 for this disease, suggesting that men are more susceptible to the H1N1 virus. This may also be due to the differences in gender-based social stratifiers, which influences the patterns of exposure to the pathogens, vulnerability to illness, and outcome of illness, resulting in differences in incidence, duration, severity, and fatality rate. The likelihood of exposure to H1N1 virus was more in healthcare workers and people who work with children, professions that are predominantly employing women. Differences in health-seeking behavior may also have significant impact on acquisition and manifestation of influenza A. In most of the developing countries, the quality of care received by women has mostly been compromised and has not been as good as that received by men. The knowledge and awareness of the pandemic among the women has been less than that of men, which is a reflection of the unequal distribution of educational opportunities between men and women in such societies, with women being less privileged, including the clinical aspects. Moreover, the outbreak of the Ebola virus in 2013 was most prevalent in adults of more than 30 years of age. Although there are no prominent biological differences in gender-based susceptibility to Ebola infection, men and women differed in their exposure. women are believed to be more emotionally attached and thus inclined to nurse their sick household members. This is also in accordance with the prevalent societal norms wherein women are considered as the primary caregivers to the diseased children and husbands. However, it is relatively less common for men to take such care of their family members during illness. In this respect, higher death rates were seen in women as their involvement in caring for the sick was higher. In West Africa, a significant gender inequality has been noted in terms of susceptibility and healthcare access, and as a result, women were rendered more vulnerable to Ebola infection. Socio-cultural barriers are believed to have denied women the access to proper health information and healthcare facilities. The Ebola outbreak in Central and Eastern Africa also indicated that the role of gender-related factors as key determinants of inequality in exposure and infection. Clinical and epidemiological data suggest that the prognosis of COVID-19 is worse in patients aged above 60 years than those who are younger than 60. Patients under 60 years tend to have less severe symptoms and higher recovery rates than older patients. Studies have shown that older patients of more than 60 years of age suffering from COVID-19 have an increased risk of death compared with younger adult patients aged less than 60 years. The risk of disease occurrence and death increases substantially in older patients who suffer from comorbidities such as diabetes, hypertension, and pulmonary and respiratory diseases. Epidemiologically, men are at higher risk of infection and severe COVID-19 outcomes than women. Reports from China, South Korea, USA, and several other European countries have indicated higher fatality rates in male patients in comparison with females. Female patients are also in less demand of intensive care and are also significantly less likely to develop the severe form of the disease. It is worth mentioning that worse outcomes and higher deaths in men as compared with women have so far been independent of age. Furthermore, male patients with comorbidities have a higher risk of getting critically ill compared with men without comorbidity, whereas there is no such association in women. Symptoms such as cough and fever are experienced more by men, while men and women have an equal prevalence of disease occurrence. The death rate is about 2.4 times higher in males than in females. A comparison of the age and gender-based characteristics between SARS-CoV-2 and other viruses suggests that the novel virus is most resembling SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV in this regard. From the comparative perspective of invasion mechanism, SARS-CoV-2 clearly shares similarities with SARS-CoV in the overall pattern of invasion and receptor specificity. Furthermore, evidence of organ-to-organ transmission of SARS-CoV-2 based on the presence or absence of the ACE2 receptor has also been reported. Therefore, in addition to the respiratory system, this virus may also infect other organs including the cardiovascular system, gastrointestinal system, nervous system, renal system, and the reproductive systems. After the outbreak of the 2002 SARS-CoV epidemic, laboratories around the world started to conduct tests and clinical trials for the development of its vaccine. Vaccines based on the live attenuated virus, live attenuated recombinant virus, recombinant modified vaccinia virus Ankara, recombinant non-replicating adenovirus, virus-like particles, and a combination of DNA, recombinant viral vector, and viral peptides were used in the development of a SARS-CoV vaccine, which reached preclinical trials. Only a few approaches reached the clinical phase 1 trial stage. These include inactivated SARS-CoV DNA-based vaccines and soluble proteins. The DNA-based vaccines and soluble proteins targeted the spike proteins of the virus or its fragments. The former induced neutralizing antibodies and T-cell responses after 2 to 3 weeks in human trials, while the latter induced neutralizing antibodies in rabbits and stopped viral replication in mice. The inactivated SARS-CoV virus targeted all of the viral proteins and caused the significant induction of neutralizing antibodies in humans after 2 immunizations with no severe adverse effects. Similarly, during the MERS-CoV epidemic in 2012, several potential vaccines were tested, but only a DNA-based vaccine was tested in the clinical phase 1 trial stage. This vaccine type targeted the viral spike proteins and its subunits and induced neutralizing antibodies and T-cell responses after 3 doses with moderate and mild side effects. Other vaccine types such as physically inactivated MERS-CoV virus, soluble proteins, nanoparticles, and combination vaccines reached the preclinical trial stage. The development of an effective vaccine for SARS and MERS-CoV was decelerated owing to a lack of suitable animal models for testing. Although the animals developed immunological responses, they showed limited viral replication and clinical manifestation of the disease. This problem was addressed by developing transgenic animals that were rendered more permissive to coronavirus infection. For example, transgenic mice were created to express ACE2, the human cell receptor of SARS-CoV, which enhanced the infection sensitivity and facilitated the evaluation of protection from a lethal dose of the virus. Transgenic mouse models that have the potential to express the human cell receptor of SARS-CoV-2 are now commercially available, which could be beneficial in the process of vaccine development. Ideally, a vaccine provides long-term protection. In SARS-CoV, although the high titers of neutralizing antibodies were detected after passive immunization approaches, these antibodies could only be tracked for about 24 hours, whereas memory T cells were detected even 6 years after infection. In the case of MERS-CoV, neutralizing antibodies persisted for about 3 years, whereas memory T cell was detected 2 years after infection. The question of whether a certain vaccination regimen can induce long-term protection has been explored in a few animal experiments. In the case of SARS-CoV, viral vectors and protein-based vaccines produced a certain level of protection from infection in mice after 4 to 12 months of vaccination. Protein-based vaccines and a combination of DNA and protein-based vaccine used against MERS-CoV have shown some degree of long-term protection in mice and macaques. So far, 162 candidates of SARS-CoV were in the preclinical trial phase and 52 candidates in the clinical trial phase, of which 10 were in the phase 3 clinical trial phase, 16 in phase 2 and the remaining 22 in phase 1 for potential development of vaccine against SARS-CoV-2. Phase 3 clinical trial candidate vaccines are non-replicating viral vector, inactivated RNA and protein subunit vaccines. The candidates in phase 2 clinical trials are non-replicating viral vector, inactivated DNA, RNA and protein subunit vaccines. The vaccine platforms of phase 1 candidates include RNA, replicating viral vector, virus-like particles and protein subunits. Vaccines against COVID-19 are being developed at an unprecedented speed, and the phase 3 clinical trials have been recruiting thousands of volunteers. For example, Pfizer and BioNTech's collaborative initiative already recruited 43,538 participants as on 27 July 2020, whereas Moderna's mRNA-1273 vaccine had enrolled more than 30,000 volunteers as on 22 October 2020. These vaccine development projects are using state-of-the-art technologies for ensuring the safety and efficacy, which may also seek to modernize other vaccines that are already in use globally. On 11 August 2020, the Russian Ministry of Health registered the first COVID-19 vaccine developed by the Gamaleya National Center for Epidemiology and Microbiology, which is currently undergoing a phase 3 clinical trial by the name of Sputnik V. It is an adenovirus vector-based vaccine, and it is claimed to elicit a strong immune response in the body. The first batch of vaccine has already been released for distribution to the public, and further large-scale regional circulation is planned in near future. Moderna Therapeutics has created an mRNA vaccine, mRNA-1273, which is also currently undergoing phase 3 clinical trials. It can mimic many aspects of the real SARS-CoV-2 virus and can induce an effective immune response. Pfizer and BioNTech have collaboratively developed this BNT162b2 vaccine, which is currently undergoing phase 3 clinical trials, and it has produced positive results in phases 1 and 2, including the production of antibodies and T-cell responses specific to SARS-CoV-2 structural proteins. On 2 December 2020, Pfizer and BioNTech's vaccine received temporary authorization from the UK Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, and on 8 December 2020, in London, UK, Margaret Keenan, a 90-year-old woman, became the first person in the world to receive a clinically approved vaccine 334 days after the first reported COVID-19 death in China. On 14 December 2020, Sandra Lindsay, a nurse at Long Island Jewish Medical Center, was inoculated with Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine in USA after it received the US Food and Drug Administration's emergency use authorization in individuals 60 years of age and older. The University of Oxford and AstraZeneca, in a collaborative venture, have developed a non-replicating viral vector designated ChAdOx1nCoV19, which is also under a phase 3 clinical trial. 3 Chinese companies, Sinovac, Sinopharm, and Casino Biologics, they have independently developed vaccines that are currently under phase 3 clinical trials too, and they have shown positive results along with mild symptoms in the recipient. Novavax Incorporated, an American company, has been testing a protein subunit vaccine, which is also undergoing phase 3 clinical trial. It has elicited robust antibody response during phase 1. China-based Anhui Zhifei Longcom Biopharmaceutical Company, in collaboration with the Institute of Microbiology, Chinese Academy of Sciences, has developed another protein subunit vaccine, which is currently being tested under a phase 3 clinical trial due to its efficacy in eliciting a potent immune response during previous phases. Lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic and other viral pandemics. The emergence of pandemics has shown that humans are not infallible, and the global population needs to be prepared for outbreaks to act appropriately and restore both the health and economy of affected nations. Economic impacts of the current COVID-19 pandemic have already been devastating, and the exact estimate of loss will be available once the outbreak is over. Risk of emerging infections is a key component of sustainable development planning, and the processes that drive disease emergence risk interact with those necessary to achieve multiple societal goals. The appearance and reappearance of such viral outbreaks can compromise the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which are set to be reached by 2030. As consequences of environmental change, emerging infectious diseases may directly impact human health outcomes. Zero hunger, good health and well-being, and life on land, which are sustainable development goals, are linked through the shared influence of environmental change. These interactions increase the transmission risk of infectious diseases while decreasing the disease regulation capacity, food production, and biodiversity. The current lack of focus on these interactions generates policy blind spots that must be addressed to ensure that sustainable development efforts are not counterproductive and do not compromise global health security. So far, policies to deal with emerging infectious disease risks have already remained reactive, focusing on outbreak investigation and control and development of vaccines and therapeutic drugs targeting pathogens. Recently, 69 countries have been engaged in finalizing the Global Health Security Agenda 2024 framework to evaluate their health security capacity through proper planning and resource mobilization in the prevention, early detection, and effective response to infectious disease threats in alignment with Sustainable Development Goals. It requires responsiveness and robust healthcare systems along with proper planning and implementation to stop the spread of the disease. SARS-CoV-2 has emerged as one of the most highly contagious viruses of all time and is spreading at a rapid pace. It appears that the lessons learned from earlier viral epidemics were not sufficient, and this has left countries around the world ill-prepared to deal with the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Several key aspects that may be regarded as lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic include prompt reporting. One of the most compelling lessons learned from all earlier viral epidemics is that there is a need to report promptly and openly cases of any disease with a potential for international spread. Then international collaboration. In the wake of a pandemic, international collaborations hold immense importance, wherein scientists, clinicians, and public health experts across the globe need to work for the benefit of mankind and dispense with competition in their respective fields. The third lesson is strengthening of healthcare facilities. A strong healthcare system is the most vital weapon of a country in its fight to control an epidemic. Thus, the top priority of a country remains the strengthening of its healthcare facilities during the inter-epidemic period. The next lesson is interventions. During the viral outbreaks, standard public health intervention strategies are to be followed, which include treating patients with antiviral drugs, following social distancing norms, and implementing quarantine measures. By effectively applying these measures, the burden on healthcare facilities may be reduced until a vaccine is developed. Finally, the perspective. As COVID-19 pandemic is proving to be an unprecedented disaster, especially in terms of health, social and economic aspects, both high and low income countries are facing catastrophic consequences. This is the third time that a coronavirus has caused an epidemic of such a massive scale in the 21st century. In this scenario, the development of new drugs and clinical trials of existing drugs are priorities, along with the design and development of vaccines for such viruses. Additionally, the natural animal reservoirs of these viruses should be identified and restrictions should be imposed on their consumption. Lessons from SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV suggest that focus should be placed on establishing animal models that can reproduce and mimic various aspects of the human disease so that further research can be conducted on the development of a vaccine. The global approach is to isolate the world population and to stop the spread of the disease while the vaccine is being developed. Certain challenges lie in the development and testing of vaccines to rapidly control SARS-CoV-2, which requires international collaboration. With the proper implementation of prevention measures, a lower incidence of COVID-19 and other hygiene linked diseases can be achieved. With this, once again, I would like to thank the Northeast Science Movement and the Vigyan Bharati and wish their initiative of NESM Expert Talk Series all success in future too. Thank you very much. Thank you all.